Hello, welcome to Inspire Me with AlinaGG. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Peta Cullis, and she's an expert dietitian, and she's got a lot to share with us today. So let's get cracking. Welcome aboard, Peta.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a very good opportunity that you've given me, and I love talking about all things food and nutrition. So I am down for this.
Fantastic. And we were speaking before about perhaps some people have some different myths associated with nutrition and diet. I know I myself do, and I'd love some clarification today on a couple of things. But do you come up across that quite a lot in your line of work?
Every day.
Yeah.
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 And
Okay.
I mean, it's a difficult field. These days, everything is open slather to people that haven't, really spent years in practice, sort of a similar education. I understand that is the case, but I would say out of all health-related industries, nutrition and dietetics is not precious anymore. It's a conversation that everybody has an opinion about. It is becoming less and less medicalized and more just common conversation, and whilst I think that's really great because it gets everyone talking about it, everybody eats, right? So everyone who eats has got to have an opinion on eating and food.
Yeah.
The clinical dietitian, and I work with people that do have some serious problems and issues when it comes to food and do need medicalized advice and therapy when it comes to their diet. So it definitely is a unique field, and I would say in my 13 years of practice, it is harder now to be a dietitian than it was when I first graduated and left.
Wow. Okay. Let's unpack that. So, okay. So, look, the way I see it, everyone's an individual, right? Everyone has an individual body. Surely it's not one size fits all with diet, is it?
No,
No.
absolutely not. No, not at all. I was actually talking to a client today. I did 2 Zoom sessions back to back with a mum, and she said to me, "Oh gosh, like this is brilliant. Nobody is as practical. You're the most practical dietitian I've ever heard." And I'm so grateful for this session. And I just think that it's the nature of our profession is that we're very young. We haven't been around for very long. There's definitely a lot of young, spunky, sexy, cute dietitians floating around that really haven't been in the industry for very long. And unfortunately, most of the people that are interacting with dietitians, they're the dietitians that they're seeing. And it takes time to become good, and it takes a skill and a dedication to anything, whether you're a builder or a plumber or you're a teacher. Like, things take time to become expert and knowledgeable and, I guess, worldly. And unfortunately, when you are, obviously seeing a lot of our dietitians that are around, because, a lot of people don't stay in the profession for very long, you do kind of get a very public health message based, session with a dietitian, because they're new and they're still learning, and and it does take time, and so my goal always is to make sure that every single client that I interact with is walking away with a different opinion, a fresh perspective, is motivated, and they've felt heard, and they are given a personalized advice that they can go and action. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, great. Well said. That's fantastic. Yeah, because you can learn all the right things, but if it's just in the too hard basket, you're just like, oh, bugger it, I'll just go and, I guess people have different reasons for coming to see you. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. And an acquaintance that has been to see you has told me that she had some issues with pain in her body, and you helped her with that. Is that correct?
I hope so. Haven't seen her yet since that since that conversation, but yeah, no, that acquaintance I have actually been seeing for an extremely long time, and a lot of my clients will stay with me for 2+ years, sometimes longer than that. I've seen clients for longer than that, and there might be ebbs and flows in terms of that frequency. There might be gaps and things, but I'd like to think that I can connect and help people with whatever they come in with. And a lot of the type of clients that I do see, they are extremely complex. I have a very unique suite of clients that I tend to attract. And so it tends to be very much a matter of fixing very, very big, broad sweeping issues. And pain obviously is a problem and has a lot of nutrition elements to not only like the pain management side of things, but also just the mind-body connection and how pain is perceived in one body compared to another. So yeah, look, conversations will always be very different. I've done this for 13 years and I am not bored.
Yeah,
every day is different.
I can imagine. And so I'm I'm a celiac, so obviously a lot of focus is on my gut and how that feels, and I'm definitely interested in that whole gut brain connection. And with pain in the body, is the main cause, without it oversimplifying anything, is it inflammation, or is that only part of it?
It's generally perception.
Perception. Can you elaborate on that, please?
You step on a nail, you see you've stepped on a nail, you go, ouch, that hurts, right? So you perceive that you've done something. And then therefore you've got a feedback mechanism that's told you where that something is, and you go, ouch, that hurts. So pain is perception, but we have the ability to override pain depending on a number of different factors. And we also have the ability to focus in on pain depending on a number of different factors. I'll give you some examples. Let's just say you've got a sore back. You've got chronic back pain, and it comes and goes, ebbs and flows. In my experience working with people with chronic back pain, as soon as I give them a new injury or a new problem, their back pain kind of moves into the background. Let's just say this person has back pain and they develop acute appendicitis. That back pain moves into the background and it's not even something they think about. Or I have a client with back pain that is chopping vegetables and they slice their finger. So it's prioritization of pain, it's acute focus, and it's perception. There's definitely a lot of areas in the body, our hands, our feet, our genitalia, and our mouth and our backside that have a lot more neural input. So there's definitely a lot more focus on those areas. I don't know if you've ever had a paper cut on the hand, but tiniest little thing, but Lord, that hurts. Because it's definitely areas of the body that are a lot more sensitized when it comes to pain. But what we've learned, particularly if you start delving into pain management, is that chronic pain is learned often. It started off as an acute problem. So let's just say you've got back pain. Maybe you've had a back spasm because you have had a lot of tension, and then you did a movement under tension, and that movement caused an acute flare in your back pain. But if you've never had back pain before and that was a thing, you know, some people move on past that, never have any issues really, and they let go of that. There are some bodies and some brains where that acute flare of this one event then perpetuates through the rest of their lives, having this mantra that they have back pain, you know, they've got chronic back pain. So that perception is definitely a huge element to pain. And the biology of pain is there. I mean, you're still feeling the thing. It's not made up. It's not psychosomatic. You're not crazy. It's there. However, in terms of it being as a result of acute injury, it is not. And so there's ways for you to shift your focus away from that pain and start letting some of that chronic pain go. And that's how we're kind of moving to perception of pain versus it being just acutely inflammation, because the inflammation response is so important and it helps our recovery. But chronic pain is not inflammation.
Well, thank you for, helping me understand that. So it's almost like, it sounds like it becomes a bit of an identity, and we kind of imprint, don't we? The more we say, I am in pain, or I'm anxious, or I'm this or that or the other, you can feel your nervous system start to latch onto that. So I totally agree with you. And it is a big picture where we're microorganisms, and, you know, we've got all these different ecosystems within us, and as well as, you know, there's so much to us, really. We're quite complex beings, but it's fascinating to look at that in a new way. That's great. Thanks for that. All right. So, and what about eating for blood type? Is that something that you have ever looked into, or?
It was definitely old dietetics. What I mean by that is probably the first 5 years of my practice, I used to get that a lot. People would come to me and go, oh, hey, I'm eating my blood type. I moved from country regional New South Wales to southeast Queensland back in 2015. I would say less than 5 times have I had someone ask me that question since I've been living here.
So not evidence-based, like not evidence-based, or it's been debunked, or it's not, you don't agree with it, or?
I think other things have taken precedence. Nutrition is fashion, and it in vogue, and it just isn't anymore. And in terms of the evidence behind it, no, not really. I think that there's eating for your genetic makeup, which, absolutely, blood type is part of that genetic makeup, but on its own and independent, your blood is not necessarily directly affected by nutrition, because there's too many other factors at play.
Okay. And have you had any crossover with, like, for example, Ayurveda, with those, the Kapha, Pitta, Vata, those types of constitutions? Do you cross over into that realm?
I mean, I do. I'm not religious, and I don't follow any particular style, I guess, of eating or thought. I love principles of all things. Like, I consider myself to be very open to all things. And if someone walked into my office and said to me that that's what they believe, they're about it, it works with them mentally, it works with them from a nutrition space, it helps X, Y, and Z, unless they're doing harm or it's a problem or I see it being risky or whatever, like, I will present my judgment and opinions based on my professional guidance, but at the end of the day, it's up to the person. So I definitely think there's some really cool points around their eating and their principles of food choice, depending on whether it's hot or a cold type, or whether you're a pitta and all those types of things. And I have looked into that at different points, and I can see commonalities between some people, but I think in order to be a good practitioner, you got to just pick up bits and pieces and then integrate that into the client that's sitting in front of you. So I think it's kind of cool. I understand it. It's a really difficult one because it's old religion and old science, and it's really difficult when you take away sort of old mantras and try to bring them into our world now. It's just so different, and I'm just not sure that we'd be able to kind of transition that into our current fast-paced, crazy way of eating,
Yep, that's a good point. Okay, and what about sugar? Is that, like, generally bad, or is a bit of sugar okay?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is extremely difficult to say that sugar is good in the context of longevity and health. However, if I have an 85-year-old client that has lost 20 kilos after having cancer, and they're at risk of malnutrition, I'm going to be giving them so much sugar. I'm going to be pumping them full of energy in whatever format I can get that, just to restore their health back to where it was and their weight. So it's prioritization of someone's nutrition goals depending on where they're at in their life. I'm probably not going to be at that is currently overweight, or maybe has hyperactivity issues, or they don't like that food, or they've got bad oral health, or I'm going to give it to all the children. Like, there's sensible, and then there's black and white, and when it comes to nutrition, unfortunately, there's no black and white. It's always maybe, but it depends. And I think that's a really good way to think about sugar, because if we were to really have a look at that nutrient on its own, we rarely consume sugar on its own. One of my questions that I'll ask my clients when they say to me that they're addicted to sugar is, okay, cool. So when you say that you love and you're addicted to sugar and you crave it, are you just taking sugar out of the sugar bowl and eating it point blank? And to this day, no one has said that they've done that.
I've seen my
So
daughter do that.
yeah, there you
But
go.
she's 11 and anyway.
Exactly. So even my mature clients and my kids have never said that they've done that. But I don't put it past
That's
you. I've
rare.
always got new things. But
Yeah.
I mean, the point with that question is a lot of the time people are more likely addicted to the food that the sugar is in, not necessarily the sugar per se. And sugar has a bliss point. So it has a point to which if it goes too high in too much concentration without a buffer, so if there's not enough fat or protein in that, it'll just be too sweet and people will stop eating it at some point.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So on its own, it's hard to overconsume unless it's in a liquid form. And then the outside of that is that most people are eating a food with sugar in it. And often that food combined with the sugar is more of a problem. So, it just becomes a little bit more nuanced than a matter of, is sugar good or bad? If we'd eat it out of that and that's all you're eating, yeah, that's probably not ideal. But I would say rarely people are doing that.
Okay. All right. And so what about with healing the gut? What are some of your best tips there?
Yes. If someone's gut needs healing, I guess my question would be around, well, what's wrong with it? So maybe if we just use you as an example, right?
Yeah.
If you have celiac disease, I wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with your gut. So if we think about healing a gut, there has to be a situation where the gut is in a state that is not settled. So the body likes to be in a really nice homeostatic balance. When the gut is not in a good homeostatic balance, it becomes more open to the movement of substrates throughout the gut lining. And our gut lining is very, very responsive to internal changes in the environment. And so if we're looking at trying to improve the health of our gut, the way I like to think about it is minimizing the stress that you're putting through your system, because your gut is one of the biggest organs that does a feedback loop constantly. So let's just say that your gut is in a state of flux because your brain is in a state of flux. So if you're going through massive stress or a lot of anxiety, if you've got mental health conditions that you're struggling with, 100% your gut will not be a very happy camper. If your gut is not a happy camper, it'll then also go back to your brain and your brain won't be a happy camper. So things tend to kind of be a very circular motion and one affects the other and they're not independent. And so when I'm working with my clients that have gut problems, my first sort of assessment is, are we working with an actual problem that started in the gut, or are we working in a problem that started in the brain and then went back to the gut? So then once I figure that out, you then realize what you need to focus on, because some clients do need direct focus on just nutrition. Others need more focus on the brain in order to kind of heal the gut, if you were to use that sort of statement. So if, for example, your gut problem started after a massive bout of stress or anxiety and you just haven't been able to settle it, then we'd probably be focusing more on, what we need to do to help manage those sort of anxieties and stresses. That's the reason why your gut sort of kicked over. If it was that you maybe had a parasite, you went to India, picked up a parasite, had really, really bad gastro, you come back, your gut's never been good ever since. Well, that was probably more of a catalyst which started in the gut. And so what we do is kind of work on improving the integrity of our gut lining. And so from food-based interventions, some really, really positive strategies that are always going to have a good outcome is upping your intake of your probiotics through food. So more of our prebiotic fibers that actually then have your probiotics in them. So things like sauerkraut and kombucha and kefir and those types of products which actually do ferment in the gut are really, really beneficial to improving the integrity of your gut lining. The other would be dairy. So a lot of people are very fence sitters when it comes to dairy, but if you look at the research, in no way, shape or form has dairy ever worsened gut health. The only time it would is if there's other things that are clouding the story. So, if dairy is ice cream or if dairy is milkshakes. I'm talking about fermented dairy. So things like yogurts and kefir and a little bit of milk, but also cheese. Cheese is a really great source of fermented dairy because it has to sit there and ferment for years. And a lot of cheese has active bacteria living on the surface and molds and things like that. So, you know, dairy, people will come at me all the time, but there's purpose for it.
Mm. Oh, wow.
The other thing about that would be looking at minimizing the movement of food particles throughout the digestive system, because if you're in that sort of state of angriness, I like to call it, your gut system becomes more leaky. And it does that because you're in a state sort of inflammation and general stress and anxiety, and it's purposeful, because if you actually had a bacteria and a parasite in your gut, you'd want your immune defenses to be coming in to kind of help and manage that. And that's why the body responds in that way. But the body can create that environment without a bacteria or a parasite. And so during those times when it's a little bit more leaky, like the channels throughout our digestive system are open, we're more reactive, more responsive, more intolerant to food, and more likely to react to food in a negative way. So the goal is to settle the storm, close the junctions, reduce the leakiness, and that can be achieved a wide range of different approaches to achieve that.
Okay. And so
very common.
Okay, and apparently parasites are more common than people realize. If someone had one, would they have to do a parasite cleanse protocol first before they start healing the gut, or how does that work?
No. The approach would be figure out whether you want to have a parasite. So you would do a PCR stool test, but you want to do a PCR because you want to see if there's any evidence of that. And then once you kind of identify whether there's still active parasite or there's just leftovers and actually is past, some people may need antibiotics to address that parasite. If there's just remnants of DNA and there's no active parasite and any great load, then there's nothing you would need to do. You would just work on, you know, restoring your diet and your gut back to where it was. Because the goal is that you want to always just bring people back to where they were before things went downhill, because that's where their gut was in that comfortable, happy space.
Okay. Well, I can understand then why it takes a bit of time to really work on it properly. It's not a matter of like, oh, I ate healthy for a week and I'm all better now. Yeah, I guess these things take time. Yeah.
But it does respond really quickly. So as long as you're doing the right things, your gut biome will change tomorrow. So if you were to go out and eat a different meal to what you usually eat, your gut's like, oh, all right, great, okay. And what it does is it constantly adjusts and titrates to what you're doing food-wise. So yes, it might improve, but you may not necessarily improve completely, but things are always changing on the daily, depending on what you're eating, what you're doing, how you're feeling, your movement, your activity, all of those things are always giving feedback constantly to your gut.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Well, okay. Anything else that you any other myths you'd like to debunk before you head off?
Oh, I've got I have many of them, but no, not really. I guess, like I said to you at the beginning of the podcast, really keen to debunk the myth of seeing a dietitian. If you've ever seen a dietitian and you didn't have a good experience and you felt like you just had basic, you're doing everything right, just go and eat some vegetables advice, you've not seen a good one. The same as you might go and see a GP or a physio and they've just given you this carbon copy here, go and do those exercises, and maybe they were in with you for 20 minutes done and dusted. Every experience with someone is different, just like you might relate to someone else in a better way, you know. So if you have had a bad experience, you hadn't got advice that was personalized, or you just didn't click, try us again. You know, I'd love to kind of remodel the perspective of dietitians as being more than just food police and people that give you basic, you know, ADHD eating advice. Because if you have gotten that, you probably need to find someone that's actually doing their job properly, or, you know, have been out there for a little while longer. So
great.
I'd love for that message to be debunked. That is the
Definitely.
goal.
Oh, great. And so how can people find you, Peta, if they'd love to come for a consultation?
Yeah, so I am based in Maroochydore. We have a clinic in the Kentucky building on the Sunshine Coast. So people can contact me via A Few Your Life, which is the company that I provide my sessions to. And outside of that, if you'd like to hit me up, I'm obviously available to chat via, you know, Instagram, DMs, Facebook, and the above.
And that's Peta Cullis on those platforms?
It is. it is.
Okay, cool. And so with this, is it like sort of a co-op, like a conglomerate, fuel your life? Is that what you're part of?
Yeah, so I run my own business. I have a dietitian business that I run myself, and that's in New South Wales, which is where I grew up. So I run my own dietitian business there. We have 3 dietitians and myself. And then in Maroochydore, I work for Fuel Your Life. We have about 60 dietitians. I'm responsible for the clinical training and the development of those dietitians, but I also consult. And then second to that, we also run, well, I do with another dietitian, we run a dietitian education platform as well, which is Dietitian Life. So there's a range of different ways that I can be contacted, but I like to have my hands in lots of different pies, doing lots of different things. So,
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your expert knowledge that you're sharing with my listeners. And yeah, look forward to touching base soon. Thank you.
thanks, Alina. Bye.